but I'm not not super sold on it. Their team's become super unresponsive in the last few months, and I don't like that. Especially after they raise millions and millions of dollars, and then they suddenly stop responding to stuff. It's like, Dragon Chain. It's a good idea. Basically, it's a blockchain that allows you to deploy smart contracts to multiple blockchains. So rather than having to like have your developers dedicate to Ethereum or to Bitcoin or to Ripple, you would post it to Dragon Chain, and it can decide like which other blockchains to send it to. Kind of like React Native, where like you write your code once and then it ports to other operating systems. That's like the main idea I've heard with Dragon Chain, is kind of an abstraction layer. And then obviously it's got all the normal blockchain stuff with it too. But we'll see what happens once they have an actual product. I don't think they have much to work with right now. Yeah. Show me something that works, then I'll be interested.
They just killed everyone. That's why they made it one.
Mario?
That's what they should.
Climbing.
They can't sure.
Well, supposedly it's going to be like...
Isn't that the Ethereum killer?
Supposedly. Everything is though, right?
True, yeah.
So
that's like the buzzword. We're the Ethereum killer. It's like, all right.
Once you stop hearing it's the Ethereum killer and you hear it's the killer, then you'll have known things have shifted. All right, let's get started. So I need to share this YouTube link. And now we will pick up where we left off, which was this application. I hope y'all studied extra hard and finished up the exercise. If you didn't, it's okay. We'll go through it now. But yeah, we'll go through that. Then we'll deploy it to Heroku. You know, from scratch. We'll just go through that real quick. It's not too difficult. It's slightly different than what you've done before, but not too different from any other Heroku deployment you've done up until this point. And then following that, we'll get you introduced to your final projects, and that will be pretty much the rest of the day, is forming your groups, formulating your idea, and getting ready to start work on your actual projects. On Saturday, I believe Oleg will be covering Redux. I might touch on it on Monday, depending upon how everyone is feeling. I have a feeling that it's just going to go over everyone's heads, considering where we're at with React in general. But it'll be good to have like at least an instructor kind of show you what Redux is and what it might be used for. That way, when you finally are more comfortable with React, when you go back to the Redux documentation, you won't be totally lost, and you'll have an idea of what it's meant to be used for. Yes, sir.
Sorry to ask, but once we build an app that we can't use, I just don't understand what's going on. Why we can't work on our project anymore once we deploy it?
No, you can totally iterate on it.
Eject, and you can't go back.
The eject thing is taking it out of Create React App and exposing like the Webpack configuration to you, the user. It doesn't mean you can't iterate on the project anymore. It just means you can't say, you can't use the same React scripts. So it allows you to iterate on the project just in different ways.
So we could do the same, we could still run it locally, but we just do node client start and node like whatever the scripts say manually? I don't know what
So when you eject your React application, it takes care of setting up the scripts for you. So you'll still be able to run yarn start, yarn build, and it will actually take care of running the React server for you. It's just doing it a different way than it was when it was within Create React App. So like when you start a new project with Create React App, you'll notice that you don't have a build directory. You don't have access to the actual transpiled version of your code that gets served to your local host.
Mm-hmm.
If you want those actual files, you have to eject it from Create React App. Create React App is simply a way to bootstrap a quick React project so that you don't have to go through the boilerplate of like setting up your index, setting up like, you know, your Webpack configuration to actually transpile it. It just kind of does that all for you.
We can maybe go back and make the app work again. Because every time I post it somewhere, it's gone. I can't get it back in. Nothing will run anymore. These both projects I work on. So
sounds like you're making a mistake somewhere, and we can, you know, we can look at that. But yeah, no, you can try to run it totally the same. It's just yarn build, and then that builds your application. Yeah, well, in order to run it locally, you just need to make sure that the paths match up. So like the gotcha that everyone was having with deploying to GitHub Pages was that the paths that it builds are relative to the root domain, but that's not how GitHub Pages hosts things, right? GitHub Pages hosts things relative to the name of the repository. So if the root is there, but it doesn't know where the files are unless you're there, obviously things aren't going to match up. So in order to deploy a React application to GitHub Pages, you have to modify the URLs in the built index HTML so that the internet actually knows where to get proper files from. That doesn't mean you can't do it locally. That just means for what you push to GitHub Pages, you need to make some modifications to get it up there. Similarly, when you're dealing with Heroku, in order to deploy your code, you'll end up having to eject your React application, and then you'll serve the build directory using Express Static. So in the past, we used Express Static to serve our public directory. Now your public files are technically your built files from the build process of yarn build.
but we're going to go through that.
Yes, that'll be a part of deploying to Heroku. All right, so let's go through this stuff that we skipped out on the other day. Let's look at student 11, 11 student React router. By the way, there's no more stuff. There is a couple more files around the final project. I'll push those after class. But this is it. Everything after now, we'll have like short 30-minute to an hour lectures. But the majority of the time spent in this class now will be working on your final projects. Because you're not going to get better at coding unless you code. Because we can sit here and show you stuff all day, but it's not going to sink in until you get your hands dirty. All right, so here we are. We have this application, right? With this books component. We see that this entire application is quite big, right? We've got a server.js, we've got this proc file, we've got package.json, we've got this nodamon.json, got these scripts, we've got some routes, got some API routes, we have our index route. Let's see here. Node modules, our models, this is how we're interfacing with Mongoose, or with Mongo. We got some controllers, right? This is the actual functionality of, finding all, find by ID. Routes will pass control off to a particular controller. Then we also have this client file, which holds your front-end code, right? So this is basically the, what's a good way to put this? This is basically your create React app code put into a directory named client that we will serve via our actual server here once we deploy to Heroku. So let's go ahead and run yarn start. Just to be clear, if we look here, I'm sorry. If we look here in the client's package.json, you'll see that the scripts say React scripts start, React scripts build, React scripts test, React scripts eject. You'll also see we don't have very many dependencies. When we eject our application from create React app, you will notice these scripts will change. They won't be React scripts anymore. React scripts is an executable. That's something, you know, just like Node. Node is an executable. React scripts is also an executable, specifically meant for, you know, doing some extra stuff like running a server for you and injecting your bundled JavaScript into an index.html, right? If we looked at public index.html, we'll see we don't actually have a script tag in here. However, when we run our React app, it's still running our JavaScript. Why is that? It's because the create React app server injects that script tag at the bottom of the body for us. It's just, it does it for us because like we don't care about this boilerplate. We just want to run our application and start developing something with React. We'll worry about deploying later. That's kind of the idea with create React app is get up and running real quick and worry about deployment later. Just gives you something to iterate with very quickly. But it's not something you would deploy with. You would never deploy with create React app. It's just a local tool to get you up and running quickly. All right, so if we run yarn start, this is from the root directory, right? So we'll see we've got the proc file, we've got controllers, models, client. This is not the client root. This is the server root, which contains the client. Assuming we have everything installed, npm install. We should just be able to run yarn start, and things should just kind of work for us. Assuming I have my database running. Yep, my database is running, so that's good. Yes, sir.
Kind of a stupid question.
No, no such thing.
What's like the difference with npm install and yarn install? Because like it kind of confuses me.
Yarn is a drop-in replacement for npm. So anything you can do with npm, you can do with yarn. The main benefit to using yarn is it caches things better than npm. So if you have one project on your computer that uses Express 321, and then you go and you create another project that also uses Express 321, npm would download 2 copies of Express 321. Yarn knows that it has already used Express 321 and will use the copy that it is already downloaded. So it makes things a little bit quicker on development because you're not having to re-download the same package twice, right? There's also some other benefits, but at the end of the day, it actually stands for yet another resource negotiator. So it's just another package manager. It's just a drop-in replacement. And I guarantee you at some point, npm itself will start doing some of the things that yarn does just because yarn has become so popular. So yeah, in here, we'll do npm install, npm I. Yarn install is equivalent. The reason I am doing npm here is because my paths are all messed up, and so I don't have yarn here. Like if I do which yarn, it's like yarn is not found, but I know I have it installed because here we can say yarn. We can say which yarn. It shows me where. So like something's going on with my configurations to where like it doesn't work properly in
this?
code.
Oh, okay. So this was.
This is in VS Code. Like, this terminal is not doing stuff right for me for some reason. Doesn't really matter. Okay. So now.
So you npm install the client and then the root.
Yes, because they both have their own package.jsons. npm or yarn install doesn't traverse your directories to see if there are other package.jsons. It just looks for the one in your current directory, and it goes, okay, this is the list of stuff we need. Let's install that. If you are using create React app to build out your client directory, then you will have two package JSONs. You have a package JSON for your front-end application, which are all your front-end dependencies. That's inside the client directory. You know, so Axios, React, React DOM, React Router DOM, React scripts.
But when you build it, does that stuff get pushed into the Webpack thing? Like the compiled version that runs
Yeah,
the client. So it sucks out like all the things it needs from those modules.
pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And it's actually including a lot more dependencies, but that's hidden within the node modules of React scripts. So if we look in here and we look at, you know, we look at all these node modules, React script actually took care of installing all these for us. But because we're using create React app and we use React scripts, it's not a strict dependency of this application. Once we eject it, you'll see this file will become much longer, because then we don't have create React app managing those extra dependencies for us. So npm and node need to know what those actual dependencies are. But here we are. We're back in the root directory. We should just be able to say npm start. And that concurrently runs the node server with Nodemon and our React application. All right, so that's how we ended up here with all this stuff, books that I should read, right? We were all doing this the other day. So how Google works, author, some person, synopsis, stuff about working at Google, I guess. I don't know. I haven't started reading this book yet, but I just bought it. And now it's on my books list. You know, we can look at Lord of the Flies by William Golding. And now we'll see, like, we have this route, books/some ID. That ID happens to be the ID in Mongo. And that just corresponds to this data here. If we go back here, we'll notice we go back to the home route, and there's nothing special about that. But we also have, you know, we click over here, and it brings us to this detail page. So how's that happening? Does anyone have a guess? How do we link between stuff? React Router. What component do we use specifically? Yes, link. So if we look in our source directory, we'll see we've got quite a bit going on. If we look in app, we will see these routes. Ignore these red lines. They're nonsense. So this should look pretty familiar. There's this switch tag, which I believe is optional. But basically, we have this router, and then we have routes defined within it. So we'll see we have a route at / which just loads the component books. We also have /books, which loads the component books. So that's interesting, right? If we go to localhost 3000 /books, we get the same view as if we go to /. And that's because we're loading the same component at both those routes, right? We have an exact path of / load books component, exact path of /books, load books component. This route here is how we're loading our detail page, right? So when we click here, we have a route of books ID. And you'll see we have books ID. Does this look familiar to anyone? The colon ID, what does that remind you all of? API parameters. What else might this remind y'all of?
Isn't it on like Mongo?
No, what takes care of your route handling on the server side? What's the web framework y'all learned how to use for handling routes? Yeah, Express. So whenever you register a route in Express, right, you remember you can have dynamic routes by doing colon and then the name of the path parameter that you want to name it. In this case, we're saying, okay, let's use books / colon ID. So we're just saying colon ID could be anything. And we'll assign it to a parameter of ID, which we'll be able to access from within the detail component. So you remember when we're using React Router, when it matches a specific route and loads a specific component, it makes available to that component a property called matches. And matches shows you like the URL that it matches. There's also, I believe it's params. And params works similar to the path parameters in Express, where you can just say params dot name of the parameter. So here we would say params dot ID. And we'll see what that looks like when we examine the detail component in more detail. The last part is this route component no match. You'll see that it doesn't have a path defined. Basically, it means we will load this when nothing else matches. I believe this switch makes it so we will only load a single one of these at a time. So that's what's going on here. Yes?
So that ID connects to the database, and then it pushes out a random number in the link.
Kind of, but it's not actually connecting to anything. Really, we're just saying we are defining a path, and it's going to look like this. It's going to be like /books and then some stuff. It's the detail component that's going to take care of making the connection to the database for us by making an AJAX request to our server with this ID. And by sending that ID to the server is going to know, oh, okay, let's look up the item of this ID in our database and deliver it back to whoever made that AJAX request. So technically, this ID can be anything, and it's not defining in this route that connects it to the database, but it's the logic that we put into our detail component that will allow it to connect to the database. So yes and no.
But when you get the list of books, the books have an href, which should be in the book/ID. You click on it, and then React says, oh, I'm going to intercept that because that matches that path. And then I'm going to run the detail.
Yeah. So let's look at this detail component. Pretty much. So we look at detail.js, and we'll see component did mount. So component did mount gets loaded, or gets ran when the component gets put onto the page. So that's how we do our initialization logic, right? When our component is put on the page, we can now make an AJAX request to go get data that we care about. And then once we receive that data from the server, we can just set state. You'll notice it pulls the ID off of the match params. So, you know, the match params, if we go to the React Router match params documentation, we'll have a little more info about what is available to us. So where is their documentation? Their documentation's weird. I want an actual.
I console log params, and then it gave like a little mini object.
Yeah.
The match was in there and a couple of things. An ID.
It's interesting that match is within the params object itself. I wouldn't have expected that, but yeah, you know, maybe that's what they're doing. Where is match? So we should be able to see something like this. A match object contains information about how a route path matched the URL. Match objects contain the following properties. Params, which these will be the things defined in the path, like colon ID or colon title or colon book name. You would be able to say this dot props dot match dot params book name title, whatever you defined it as over here in your routes, right? So if we say title here, over in detail, you know, we would just have to say title. And so that's programmable. Pretty similar to what you have done on in Express before, when you're pulling parameters off of a path in Express. But yeah, it just makes an API request to the server. It gets the book, then it sets state. And then the rest of this, you know, is just setting some markup, right? So like we've got our container component, we've got our row, our column, our jumbotron. You know, this is putting the book title and the book author on the page. So that's how we end up seeing, you know, book title by book author. And then a little bit lower, it says synopsis, right? Synopsis. And this dot state dot book synopsis, which is right here. And that's pretty much it. If we look at the books component, this is just our list of books, right? So when this list of books loads, that's our books component. So it gets all the books, then it sets the state, allows us to delete a book, handle input change, handle our form submission. And, you know, this is basically some markup with some JavaScript functionality attached. That's this application in a nutshell. So before we move on to deploying this to Heroku, questions? Yes, go for it.
In the scripts, do you mind the package .json? Just real quick. So start runs React script start.
Yes.
Can we see what we're in the client? Can we go to the server?
So start here.
It runs node. So it literally types node mon server, and then it types node npm run client. Is client above?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you do npm run, it references one of these scripts. So yeah.
So it'll intercept whatever those keywords are, and like client exists in the scripts, so it's going to run what client is.
Exactly. And concurrently is just the tool that lets us run multiple commands from the same command. You know, we've got like this seed, that's just seeding our database. We've got this build that is, I'm curious what this build is doing on the server side. It's just running the build for our client.
Echo is something that happens after.
Echo?
Yeah, so that happens first and then exit.
Well, this would be the test script, right? So if we're running npm start, this test script doesn't get ran. But echo, that's just basically, it just echoes back what you said. So if we say echo hi, it just says hi. If we say echo stuff, it just returns back stuff.
Echo.
Exactly. Echo, echo, echo. Echo, echo. See, echo's echo. All right. Any questions about the application logic?
It's just a lot of stuff.
It is. That's why I didn't try to rush you all through it with 10 minutes of the last class. But even though it is a lot of code, all the concepts are what you already know, right? Like, you know how React Router works. That's the newest thing to you, so it's still probably a little fuzzy. But you know you define routes on the front end with it. You know that it loads a component for you, and you know that you use the link component in order to actually link between different parts of your page. You know, like, yeah, there's many different components in here, but when you break them down, really it's just like event handlers and stuff reading state, you know, a group of input components, right? You know, a column, a jumbotron. These are just wrappers around the Bootstrap versions of these same components, right? You know, here we're just saying, okay, create a list item for every single list item in Maps books, right? Like, you know what .map is now. It creates a new array for you based on a prior array. So you can create new data based on old data, right? The new data in this case is these list items. So we're saying take the raw JSON books data, and for each one of those, create a list item with this information about the book plugged into it. You know, then we've got ternary. So like there's a lot of code, but none of the concepts are different from anything that you've learned already. It's a much bigger project. So naturally it's a little bit more confusing. And let me say that, like, when you get into the real world, projects have like hundreds of files. Like, and I'm not exaggerating. It is really tough to like find your way through a project if you don't know how to search. So one thing that we haven't really, I don't know, you've probably seen me use grep. Turns out there's a tool called Git grep, which allows you to search for text anywhere in your Git repository. It's a little bit easier to use than grep. Grep requires you to like know flags and like certain stuff like that. Git grep really just works. So say we didn't know where like where a list item was being used in our repository. You can say git grep list item. And it's like, oh, okay, well here's all the places it's used. It's used in client source components list item. It's used in index. We see list item is used in these 3 places of books. So git grep is a really useful tool for like searching around a repository without actually knowing where something might live. So I would highly suggest get used to using git grep as far as making it easier for you to discover stuff about a directory, right? If you don't know where anything is in it, but you know that there's an error on the page, grep for where that error is coming from. You'll see like cannot call method such and such of undefined. Well, just do git grep such and such. And it will look, and I guarantee you somewhere in your project, you have a method named such and such. And that's a good place to start, right? That might not be where the bug is coming from, but at least you have, like, you're in. Yeah, you have a place to start investigating. So tools like that will make it easier to get acquainted to a new project. And really, whenever you're brought onto a new project, it takes, at a minimum, like 4 months to get acquainted. And that's like, if it's a relatively simple project and you're like an amazing developer. In reality, it takes from like 6 months to a year, depending upon, you know, who you are and what you're working on. And, you know, that's to be expected, which also means that you can like kind of float around from company to company without really doing much, and make some good pay. I would not suggest that as a long-term strategy, but it kind of works in the short term. You know, obviously, once you're in a company, it's going to be easier to learn for you as well, because it's going to go from being, oh, I do this 2 or 3 hours, 2 or 3 times a week, to I do this 8 hours a day every day. So really, once you start a job, it's a lot easier to learn, and it's a lot easier to keep learning. With that said, getting the first job is just tough. And it's a pure numbers game, and you really just have to apply everywhere and probably take a job at a place that you like weren't really expecting to get an offer from, and kind of just going with it for the first year, and then start looking in a more directed fashion. I would say just spread shot for your first job. Literally, like, apply everywhere. It's a numbers game. Okay, so if there aren't any more, I mean, yeah, there's probably questions about like how this component does something, or how where is this coming from? But I guarantee you, if you look into the component, you'll be able to track it back. But overall structure and overall, I don't know, the essence of this application, does it all kind of make sense to some level? Any more questions before we try and deploy? Let's deploy. Okay, cool. Yes, so we're gonna go here. So now we're in solved client, right? So if we go, oh no, I cut my finger. Right, so now we can see that we're in the server. First, we will go to client. I'm sorry, first we will run, we will go into client. We will run yarn build. Yeah. I do. You actually have one on you?
I in trouble.
Scott, you're the best. Thank you.
Unfortunately. Oh, no, they're both new ones.
Nice. Thank you. What did you say?
So right there where yours says npm install global service, and mine says yarn global add instead.
I'm not so sure. I would have to copy and paste what yours says into Google and look for it, but we can look into it later. Shouldn't really matter all that much.
So we have to build both.
So we don't need to actually build anything on the server side, right? Because that's just going to be run with Node. The only thing we need to build is the React application. Yeah. So here, you'll notice that we didn't actually eject it from React. We were still able to build it. And this build directory contains
We use npm build.
Yeah, npm build or yarn build. Yarn, npm, you can think of them as like literal replacements for each other. They shouldn't cause any issues to switch from one to the other. All right, so if you look at our build directory, you'll see it has everything that we need. It has an index.html. It has all the static files. And that's all we've got to do there. So we built out our client, our front end, right? Let's take a look at server. So in the past, this line here has used public, right? That should look a little more familiar. Now we're saying rather than our static assets being in the public directory, it is within client build. So express static will serve static files that are within client build.
Where is this?
This would be on the one level up. So same directory as where your models is, your client, routes, scripts, controllers, server.js.
The root.
Yes, the project root. Yes. So if we look at client, that's client, we'll see it has a build directory, right? And that's going to house everything we need. So if we look at client, build, we'll notice that it has this index.html. Does anyone remember what express static does when you have an index.html in the files that you're serving with express static? Okay, if you don't, just testing y'all. Okay, if you have an index.html in your static directory, express static will intercept requests to the root. So if you have your localhost at localhost 3000, requests to localhost 3000/ will automatically be responded to with index.html. So you'll notice in our routes, we don't actually have a home route. Express static will be serving that for us. The other thing I want to point out here is in our routes, you'll see we have index. I'm sorry, that's the wrong index. We have index, and we're using API routes with a prefix of /API. And then we'll also see, okay, if we got a request at some random URL, we want to go ahead and serve the index.html from client build. You'll notice there's the ... and that's because we're within the routes directory. So it's got to go up one level and look over to client. And then it goes into build, and then it sees, okay, there's index.html. So it'll send that out. So by default, our application is going to send out index.html, but express static will also intercept stuff at the root and provide an index.html when you hit the / route, when you hit the root route, when you hit the home page. So that's how we're actually going to serve our HTML.
So that route is redirecting if someone typed in like / and then something that doesn't exist, it would redirect you to the home page. So
this is not technically a redirect, because that would be like res redirect, which for SEO purposes might be better. Instead, what this will do, it will just say, no matter what route we're at, serve index.html.
And that's because it's not function. I mean, it's just calling.
So like router.use, this happens to be the very last route of our application. So if we look in our server JS, we'll see that we use routes, and then we never register any routes below that, which means that our routes index file, this is the last piece of middleware that we could possibly see. Because it's the last one, we're just saying, okay, by default, respond to any request with this file. If it happened to match one of your API routes, like API books / then it would match this one. If it was books / some ID, then it would match this one, and these would end up taking control for us. Let's see here. So we've gone ahead, we've ran yarn build. Basically, all we've got to do. I did. Although I believe if we look at the package.json in this example, I think we also have our own build script. But I bet you this just runs npm run build for the client. If we look at scripts, why is my autocomplete not working? client.
Looks like it's the same.
Yeah.
I saved the package based on before the build.
It won't change unless you run npm run eject. So building does not eject it. Scripts, vi scripts build.js. It's just running npm run build with the current working directory being the client directory. So this client says, go into the client directory relative to where we are and run this command. So if you happen to look at Node's definition of child process and spawn, you'll see that it accepts options, it accepts arguments, and it accepts a command to run. So npm is the command. The arguments are these. And options, these probably just get set as flags like dash dash standard IO, dash dash current working directory, dash dash shell. So I just realized because I'm in the full stack repository, if I were to try and deploy this to Heroku, it would try and deploy like the entire lecture. So let's go ahead and open up Finder, and I'm just going to make a quick little repository that lives outside of this stuff. So we're going to move we're going to move solved into this temporary directory. And once we get that going, we should be able to move along. Let's see. All right, so now we're gonna. So here we are. We'll go back to solved. We're gonna do git init, git add that dot. All right, so we're just adding everything in here. I probably should have created a git ignore. Let's do that. vi.git ignore. And let's say ignore node modules. Also, you can do client/node modules, right? Because we don't care about the node modules for either of them. So git add all. That looks like everything. Right? Sounds about right. Got our build directory. Yeah, right, because we want our server code and our client code to be in our Git repo. So now we can say git commit, initial commit. And there we are. We've got a repository. Now, let's go to Heroku. Heroku.com. And once this finishes loading, then we'll run Heroku create from my terminal, and we should see a new project pop up on my dashboard.
Can you go over this stuff one more time? Because I got first go to client, run build.
Yep.
We go to the root. I got is it npm init? Git init?
Git init is how you start a repository, right?
And then you added the git ignore.
Yeah.
Modules.
Right. So node modules will go in your git ignore like normal.
And then what do you do after?
That's all we've covered so far.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
Then you added it. You get add it. That's what you just did.
Git add? Was it?
yeah, you have to make a commit, right?
Okay.
So once we have our commits done, yes.
Sorry, I was just curious.
Yeah, I just ran git init, git init, right? That's how we create a repo. And then you add all the files to the repo, and then you commit them, right? So we say git add dot, which adds everything, and then git commit is how we actually commit changes to our repository. Yes, it creates one on your local. This does not create one in GitHub.
Then you'd have to add the remote.
Exactly.
You still need to copy the link
From
the
GitHub?
one that you created on GitHub.
Only if you want to push it to GitHub. Like, I'm not going to push to GitHub right now, so I don't need it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do Heroku create. We're going to call this, what is it? React Books demo. So we're creating this. Should do some stuff. Okay, so we ran Heroku create. If we come back here, we should see React Books demo. Cool stuff. In addition to creating that on Heroku, you'll also notice git remote -v. We now have a Heroku remote. This did not exist before we ran Heroku create. Okay. Next. Because our application uses Mongoose, we want to add the Mongo lab package. So we go to our application, we go to resources. You remember JAWS DB for when we wanted to work with MySQL. Mongo has something similar, which is MLab MongoDB. So we click that. And you know, if you need a ton of data, then you can pay $4,740 a month. And that'll hold like a ton of effing data. Obviously, for us, we're okay with the free version, right? We're not dealing with that much data. So we can say sandbox free, and we say provision. And boom, there it is. So if we go to our settings and we reveal config vars, if I wasn't going to delete this project immediately after class, you would not want to do this on a live stream because now people have access to my username and my password and stuff. But you'll see in these config vars, when we added MLab MongoDB add-on, it automatically added this MongoDB URI environment variable for us. So if we look back in our code and we look back at server.js, you know, we're already used to having Heroku provide the port to us. Now it's going to provide the connection logic or the connection string so we can securely connect to Mongo without having to include our secrets in our Git repository. So you'll see here it says mongoose.connect, process.env.mongodb URI, right? And you'll notice that matches up exactly with this one. Process.env MongoDB URI. Casing counts. Like, you know, Mongo. Oh, hold on, if I can spell MongoDB right. That wouldn't work. Because it is looking specifically for MongoDB URI, as it is spelled here. So we say, if this is provided to us, use that as our connection string. Otherwise, default to the local host. You'll also notice on our local host, we have specified the name of a database. We don't need to do that here because MLab has already created a database for us. And they named it Heroku_MZM61GJ0. Right? Because the database name doesn't actually matter. The only thing that matters is the schemas within your database. The tables are the collections you're dealing with, right? So the actual database name is just a place to store data. All right. So that's that.
So sorry,
Yeah, no
but when you're doing, so you have to have a Git in order to use Heroku Create.
Yes.
And do you have to have created a GitHub?
No, actually, you can use Heroku without GitHub entirely, but you have to use Git.
So by using Heroku Create, it creates a new origin.
Yes. Yeah. It creates a new origin.
Because I did Git init after I did the Heroku Create, and then I did Git remote -b, and there was nothing.
Yeah. So you would have to create the repository because you only have a remote. You should just be able to do Heroku add in the name of the remote, like Heroku remote add, and then the name of whatever it happens to be. I believe it's here in the settings. Yeah, so you'll see here in your settings, you have your Heroku Git URL. You can just do Git remote add and then this URL, and that will add a remote for you. Similar to how if you created a Git repository on your local and then you wanted to push to GitHub, you know, if you go to GitHub and I create a new repository, garbage. All we've got to do is we say git remote add the name of the remote. So that's the thing I had forgotten with the Heroku command, or with adding the Heroku remote, is you would have to say git remote add Heroku, and then the link from Heroku.
Oh.
You have to give your remotes a name. And then in this case, you know, if I wanted to sync up my solved version with this, I can just do git remote add origin GitHub or git at github.com, see others garbage.git. In fact, you know what? Let's do that. Why not?
Just got a question for you on
Yeah. Will Heroku seed your data with M? Nope. It will not seed your data with MLab. You would have to run the seed command against the remote database. And our build script is only set up to run it against our local. But that's as simple as changing a connection string. You should be able to change it to the connection string that is given to you here, and you can run your seed script with this as your connection string. This won't work in these rooms because UCLA blocks non-standard ports. You've heard me say this a million times. But if you were to run this at home or on like a hotspot, it would work just fine. So here we are. We've got git remote add origin. You know, this is just how we add a remote to our repository. So now when we do git remote -v, we see we have Heroku and origin. If we do git push -u origin master, rather than just being an empty repository, this becomes our stuff, right? So now we should just be able to just push everything to Heroku. So now we can do git push Heroku master.
Do you need to do the git commit and all that stuff?
I had already done that before, but yeah, you definitely need to commit your changes to your repo, because otherwise what you're pushing
So
won't
it's just
go.
like Git, it speaks Git.
Yeah, it is a Git client. Git is just a protocol. Okay, so let's see here. What doesn't it like? Let's see. 2 different lock files, packaged lock. So like this is something you might run into. Like if you're switching between npm and yarn, npm will create a package lock, yarn creates a yarn lock. And when you push this to Heroku, Heroku's going to be like, I don't know what to do. Which one do I look at, right? Because it creates a lock file to like pin down the versions. So if you're giving it 2 things which are supposed to pin down the versions, what's it supposed to do? It doesn't know. So thankfully, Heroku is nice and just tells us. It doesn't know what I'm talking about. And it gives you a nice little explanation too, right? It says both NPM and Yarn have created block files for this application, but you can only use one. So let's just go ahead, and it even tells you the command to run, right? It says, if you want to use NPM, remove the Yarn lock from your Git repository. If you want to use Yarn, use git remove package lock. So let's use Yarn, right? Why not? So we can say git rm package lock. If we run git status, we'll see we have deleted package lock from our Git repo. If we look here, it still exists. Why does it still exist? We didn't push it. What else haven't we done? We added it. We didn't commit. We didn't commit. But yes, you picked up what I was throwing down. So now we can commit and we can say remove extra block. That seems like a reasonable thing to do. So git push origin master. Once it finishes resolving its deltas, whatever that means, resolving the changes that have occurred is what I'm assuming it means, right? A delta represents a change. Now, when we do this, package lock is gone, but our Yarn lock is still there. So now we can confirm, like, okay, this is a little more similar to like what we're expecting to go up. So now let's try it again. Git push Heroku master. Now, everything should just work. Fingers crossed. You'll see it's building our dependencies. It's installing node modules. You'll see it's using our yarn.lock to determine it. If we didn't have a lock file in there, it would just look at our package JSON. And there, it has released. So if we do Heroku open, should open up. Yeah, there we go. This is live on the internet.
So you don't have to eject anything?
No. The only reason we had to eject for GitHub pages was that we really needed access to that index.html. And in fact, if you use npm run build, you probably don't even need to eject when you're using GitHub pages. Yeah. As long as you get that build directory and you put the contents of the build directory in your root directory for GitHub, that's all you need. For some reason, I thought you had to run npm run eject, but it looks like you don't need to. But it is a good thing to know that you can eject your React application in case you're trying to use Webpack loaders that are not supported by Create React App. Create React App might not use CSS Next yet. It might only use SCSS. So if you wanted to set up some custom configurations, then you would eject it to give you a little more fine-grained control.
I got an invalid host header.
Invalid host header. From Heroku?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Heroku invalid host header. Can't remote develop, create. Seems like it's a common Create React App issue. Yeah, so basically we'd have to go through here and figure out what the solve is. Because I bet you someone in here has solved it. Although it looks like they're still talking about it and no one has resolved the issue yet. So yeah, that's interesting.
It's 3 for 3.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with your machine. That's interesting. Theoretically, it should just work. theoretically, this is what you should see when it's all said and done. And you should be able to add stuff here like Hitchhiker's Guide, Douglas Adams. Arthur Dent goes on a trip. When we submit the book, you'll notice it's a little bit slower than it was on our local. Can anyone take a guess why that is?
Doesn't it have to go through the server first? Their server first versus we're just going locally.
Exactly. So like here, like when it's on your local host, it's just making a request to your own local host, connecting to a database on your local computer. So the latency is like that. It's like super, super quick. On the internets, now this front end has to make an actual HTTP request to some server somewhere from our UCLA connection. Then that server has to make a connection to its database, which is also another hop. And then it's got to bring it back. So you can kind of get a false sense of security when you're running apps locally because you'll think, oh, everything's so speedy and so snappy. And so you might think like, okay, we don't really need a loading spinner because everything loads so quickly. But then when you get here, you'll be like, oh, well, you know, founding Declaration of Independence, really a book, but founding fathers. You know, here when I clicked it, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't super slow, but it was slow enough to where it's like, did my click do anything? You might put a loading spinner in there to indicate to the user, we're doing stuff, we're not just ignoring your click. And you know, our application still works just fine. What's cool about this is we should be able to go to any route directly. So you remember how we had that router.use at the very end, which would always provide the index.html? So we're not redirecting them. We're just providing the React application to them. The React router is going to see, this is our current route, so it's going to try and load the component in the page associated with that route. Pretty neat, right? I think so. And that's that.
Can we run it locally now?
Yeah. So if we wanted to run it locally, then we can just do, you know, npm start. Yeah, it should still work. So now we'll go here and, you know, here's our local host. And it's loading. Yeah, it's loading. And it's loading. And there's our stuff.
So it's like repeating this, but how did we eject? Like,
I kind of gave you a wrong reason for why we were ejecting. I was thinking that you had to eject in order to build it. Turns out you can just run React scripts build. But you would eject if you wanted to have more advanced Webpack configuration.
Webpack configuration?
Like loaders. So Webpack loaders. You can have like different processing steps. Right? So we can have like a step that will gzip stuff for us. And we define that by setting our configuration like this. Like we enforce, you know, every loader is slightly different too. They have different properties. But you know, here we're just saying use gzip loader. And gzip is a way of compressing what you send down to the browser, and browsers know about gzip. So if they see that something has a content encoding of gzip, it will unzip it using the gzip method. There's also Brotli, which is catching on, which is more efficient and a little bit quicker. And there's tons of content encodings. I don't know them all. I don't think anyone does. I'm sure there's a list somewhere, probably Wikipedia. There's this HTML loader. You know, this just allows us to like load HTML, I'm guessing. We have this ESLint loader, so this might be used for like deciding what ES linting we want to occur before we actually allow our app to build. So if we want to enforce certain rules like must use fat arrow functions for anonymous functions or something, that might be a bad example. A good example might be allow trailing commas or enforce trailing commas. You know, in older versions of JavaScript, a trailing comma on an object would error out. With ESLint, it can look and be like, okay, you have that trailing comma, let's remove that for you. Or it can say like, okay, you must have a trailing comma there because that's what your code repository's style is. So there's all these different loaders, and I really don't know even a third of them, even a quarter. I haven't spent as much time with Webpack as I really should. But they basically just allow you to add extra functionality into your build steps. And you know, like if we wanted to use CoffeeScript, we could use the coffee loader. That doesn't come with Create React App by default because you're writing in JSX. But say you had some CoffeeScript files in your repo, you would have to npm eject and add this piece of configuration to your package.json so it knows what to do with .coffee files. The way these loaders are set up is they have a test parameter, and then they have a test key, and a use key. Basically, the test key says any file that ends with .coffee, use the coffee loader on it. Let's look at the Mocha loader. Here we're saying any file that ends in test.js, use the Mocha loader on it. So it might know to run tests for that loader. And like you can dive as deep as you want to in Webpack. It's like a whole field of skills. And to be honest, it's still relatively new. I had my coworker ask me the other day, what's Webpack? And to me, I'm like, how do you not know? But it's relatively new. It's been out there for maybe 3 or 4 years. That's at least how long it's been super popular for. It might have been in existence before that, but you know, it's another tool to use.
So if we were working on a group project, and would it be better just to eject as soon as we're done doing a Create React app?
No, I would say avoid ejecting unless you really need to mess with the Webpack configuration.
And I don't understand what those are at all anyway, so I guess I won't eject.
Well, once you dig into Webpack,
are we gonna have to use them?
Not for this class. You don't have to use one for your final project, but at some point you might want to add extra steps to your build process. And at that point, you'll have to eject. There's certain loaders that work with Create React App out of the box. So if we talk about Create React, it gives us some info on the loaders. So, you know, we can go down and we can see, you know, available scripts. Post-processing CSS. That is like adding a CSS preprocessor. That is a step in Webpack. Like Webpack takes care of running your preprocessor for you. It happens to be a really common one, so it's built into Create React App. But less common ones, like maybe gzip isn't respected by default. Right? Like gzip doesn't show up anywhere on the page. So yeah, it's something that you should definitely be aware of it. It's basically an asset pipeline, a tool for taking source files and transpiling them into something readable by the browser. Is it super necessary in order to deploy code to the internet? No, but it's necessary like if you want to well, it's not even necessary, right? You can use Babel on its own, but it's a little bit easier when you use Webpack and use its configuration to have it do it for you, rather than just running like Babel, this file with these presets. Webpack kind of just consolidates the configuration into a file for you and allows you to share that configuration with others.
So let's say we want to use one of these for a project, and then we have to eject our app. How do we keep developing?
You can keep developing with an ejected app. It's just we've already done that. So if we go back here to from example, right? This is an ejected React application. So if we look at package.json, it has Babel core, it has Babel ESLint, Jest, loader, chalk, CSS loader, .env, ESLint, FS, Jest. We can still work on our application. We can still say npm run start. This is from some example we made in the past. That package JSON is what gets created when you run npm run eject. It gives you all the dependencies that your application actually needs, rather than concealing it within your React scripts.
Well, we're not going to do it on this one, like this books one.
No, we don't have to.
Okay, I guess we'll just have it.
I mean, so look, let's do it for this one then.
Does anyone else know how to do this? I mean, I'm sorry. Nobody understands.
Literally, all you do is it's not that important, but literally all you do is you run npm run eject, and it exposes configuration to you. That's it. So like, look in here. We got our client package.json. It's got React DOM, React Router DOM, React scripts, right? npm run eject gives us this scary message. We hit yes. Oh, well, I didn't hit yes. Hit yes. Does this stuff, right? Basically adds all these dependencies to our dependencies because they're not hidden in React scripts anymore. We need them. So now we look at our package.json. And boom, there's all our stuff. And all this was hidden within React scripts. But it doesn't matter because we can still run npm run start. And it'll still run our client application. But you'll notice the package.json has more options there. That's it.
Okay. Mine errors out.
It shouldn't be erroring out. Probably got to do an npm install after you do that. I mean, it definitely works. I've done this many times. All you got to do is npm run eject. That's it. Still works, and it gives you access to your Webpack configuration. That's it. And our Webpack configuration is down here at the bottom of our package.json. So all this was hidden from us before, but now we can configure it a little bit more. That's it. Okay, cool. So we've deployed to Heroku. That's that. Let's get to, yeah, I think we should start talking about the final project. So here we are, final projects. You made it. You know, you might still be confused about stuff, but that doesn't mean you don't know things. I am confused every day of my life, but I know how to look through documentation. I know how to look through Google and Stack Overflow to help me get past these confusions. hopefully you have been practicing these skills because they're going to become more important to you when you actually are off on your own. So I don't know how to put this in presentation mode.
Isn't it on the top right? Is this
Yeah, where? Should say somewhere.
on the top right next to your seat?
Oh, hey, there it is. Thank you. So here we are, final projects. Right, we're almost there. So there, right? So damn girl, you was smart. I mean, this is more or less what we covered throughout the entire class. It's a lot of code, right? There's HTML, there's CSS, there's JavaScript, jQuery, Bootstrap, SEO, I don't know. I mean, we talked about rendering markup from the server side. That's what they're considering to be SEO. We never really got deep into search best practices for search engine optimization, but it's good that you know it exists. It's good that you know you can write your site in a way which makes it easier for a search engine to look at. And literally, you could spend a lifetime looking at any single one of these pieces of technology and still not know everything about it. And the reason is technology just iterates that quickly. It just changes all the time. What you know this year will help you next year, but some of it will be irrelevant. And that's just the way the tech world moves. I've had to learn 5 different front-end frameworks now, and I've only been doing this for 4 years. Let's see what they were. They were Backbone. I had to learn a little bit of Angular. I had to learn Flight.js. I had to learn Knockout. And now I've learned React. And I bet you there's one other one. Am I experts with any of them? No. But it doesn't matter because I'm good enough with them to get my job done. And at a certain point, it's like you don't need to know everything about a library. You just need to know how to do it, use it to do what you want to do, right? So MySQL, Mongo, I'm sure some of y'all could use some more practice on joins or using Mongoose's populate feature, but honestly, I could probably use some experience with joins and the populate feature as well. But we know how to look up how to do these things on the internet so that when we actually do need to use these tools and we know that they exist, we can look up the exact syntax later and, you know, debug it as we're going through the code. APIs, consuming them, right? That's just making a request out to some server and getting some JSON back and doing what we want with it. JSON, what's JSON? Yeah, and it's how we send data throughout the internet, right? AJAX, anyone know what that stands for? Yeah, me too. Asynchronous JavaScript. Basically, you're making a request asynchronously on your front end rather than having to make a full page reload for any data, right? Real-time cloud database via Firebase. Yeah, we learned a little bit about Firebase. I'm sure you want to know more. In fact, when we do the review sessions, by the way, don't mention the review sessions to the other class. They'll probably get jealous. So, yeah, but I mean, honestly, y'all probably knew more than you were giving yourselves credit for. Like, yeah, you had a sour experience to start, but like, you know, doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is you have learned these technologies. You know enough HTML to write markup on a page. You might not know it perfectly, but nobody does. React.js, you know a bit about that. Heroku, probably use some help deploying to the cloud, but most new devs do. For example, the first time I ever deployed an application to the cloud, it took me a good month to get it up there. And then what was weird was it wouldn't work unless I left it in debug mode, which is dangerous because that means anyone who like ran into an error would see like my server files and like everything in them. So as a new dev, getting stuff on the internet is tough. But GitHub Pages, Heroku, those are much easier than having to set up like an AWS server. Node.js, Express.js, creating APIs, right? You know how to consume them. You know how to create them. How do you create an API? You register a route and you send data back from that route. That's all you're doing, right? An API is just some location on the internet that gives you data. Where that data comes from is up to you, right? It could come from a database. It could come from multiple databases. It could come from another API and a database, right? You could munge together like 20 things and send that down. User authentication, yeah, you know, maybe some of you played around with Passport. One of the requirements for the final project is that you have some sort of user authentication. So if you didn't learn Passport last time, better learn it this time, and you better ask questions because it's not easy. If you wait until the last week to try and set up Passport, you're gonna have a bad day. JD did? Perfect. Because it is a requirement for the final project. Can anyone tell me what MVC stands for? Yeah, and that's a design pattern. So right now you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't know design patterns. I don't know computer science fundamentals. Well, you do. You know MVC. You know about JavaScript constructors. You might need a little more practice with JavaScript constructors, but you know that they exist. This is a design pattern. Algorithms. Algorithms is a fancy way of saying a procedure to do a specific thing. For a long time, I got hung up on the word, and I was like, I need to be great at algorithms. I need to be great at algorithms. And sure, you know, like that comes in handy, being good at algorithms. If you know how to do binary search, like on the back of your hand, at some point that's going to come in handy. But do you know when I last wrote binary search for a job? Take a guess. Never. And that's because I probably use the find method in my JavaScript, or like on the JavaScript array, and it might do some sort of binary search or something much more efficient than what I could come up with. There's a couple of good books on algorithms that I want to mention. There is algorithm design. Yeah, there's this book, which has like this bird on it. And then there's another one, which, yeah, these are the two. Everyone buys them together. Algorithm design, I read this. I maybe got a third of the way through it, and then I decided, I was like, okay, I know enough about algorithms now. I don't need anything else. It shows you like mathematical details of like very specific algorithms and how to like think about logic for your code. So if you are wanting to know more about algorithms, these are a couple of good books to go through. They're pricey, but they're well worth it. You know, it's just a fancy word for a way to do things. Like the algorithm for, I don't know, making a cheeseburger is get all the ingredients, set 2 buns there, craft a beef patty, right? Step-by-step instructions on how to achieve a goal. That's all it is. ORM. What's an ORM stand for? Yeah, Object Relational Mapper. ODM. Yes, Object Document Mapper. They take your database representation, they turn it into an in-memory object for you in JavaScript. So goals. I'm sure everyone has them. You know, web dev pays well. And it pays well because it's tough. It's not easy. Staring at documentation is not fun. I have tricked myself into thinking it's fun. I tell myself I have a blast with it, But really, there's a certain amount of lying that I'm doing to myself in order to just force myself to read it. Do I enjoy reading blog posts about the next version of Node? At first I didn't, but now I do. So really, it's kind of one of those like fake it till you make it type things where it's like, you know, if you're not there yet, kind of pretend like you are. Give yourself some self-confidence. Give yourself some credit. Yeah, the Boston Marathon winner said something that I really, really liked because it's something that my parents always told me and I never listened to them. But they were just like, show up. And that's what the marathon winner said. Her name's like Des Linden. She goes, just show up. If you show up, you're gonna learn something, you know, and by show up, obviously it's not really to class anymore. I mean, yes, we have some classes left, but it's not really to class. It's just showing up to learn, you know, wherever that may be. Find those blog posts, find those new libraries, look at Hacker News every day. Just read one. You don't have to read the entire feed because no one's going to do that, but just make it a point. Read a single article a day. Maybe do one tutorial every couple days, right? Just keep building your skills. If you don't, you'll quickly learn that you are not going to know anything in 3 years because the world will have changed so much compared to what you learned today. So definitely keep learning. Didn't quite make your target? Let's chat. My chat, you know, feel free to pull me aside. That's fine. But my chat to you is just keep learning. My parents were telling me to go be a dishwasher before I started on my web dev journey, and I was just like, no. I have a college degree. I should be doing more than dishwashing. And I went back to my college job, and I just kept doing security installs until I knew enough about web dev to start interviewing for web dev stuff. And then I found a boot camp, and then I went there, and they got me further along. But the fact of the matter is, keep learning. Keep learning, keep learning, keep learning. If you don't, you'll fall out of web dev, and it'll be just as hard as when you first started this class. Maybe not just as hard because you'll have learned a for loop already, but in those concepts aren't changing. Flow control, like that's here to stay. But you know, it might be in a different language. And learning a new programming language is always tough. So what's left? Basically a lightning talk on Redux. We're gonna go over some CS algorithms. We're gonna go through, what else are we going through? I think we're gonna talk about big O notation, which is just like analysis of algorithms, space complexity, time complexity. We'll talk about that. Basically just a small group of talks that will not take up the entire class, but will kind of just give you a taste of some stuff that's more advanced, and will give you a taste of what it's like to, you know, maybe hear a lightning talk out there in the world, and then you can dig more into it on your own. There's job workshops. I believe the job teams have been syncing up with you on this stuff, I hope. If not, definitely reach out to them. Something I want to start doing in class is whiteboarding. We pushed up those questions to the Git repo a few weeks ago. Hopefully y'all have been practicing. You don't want your first whiteboard problem ever to be at your first interview ever, because that's just going to be the most nerve-wracking thing alive. Regardless of how many whiteboarding problems you do ahead of time, that first interview is still going to be extremely nerve-wracking. No matter how many times you do it, interviews are just, I don't know about you, but I always get butterflies. So practice them here. Yes.
Do you think that I'd be selling myself short if I looked for an internship?
Yes, I do.
So this course pretty much prepared us for like a junior developer role.
I would be looking for junior dev roles.
Okay.
And, you know, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy to find one. There's a lot of boot camps out there right now, and some companies have gotten a sour taste from hiring some coding boot camp grad who like thought they were amazing and ended up just being like, you know, kind of a dick at the workplace. And so that kind of ruined boot camp devs for that company. Like, don't be surprised if you hear that out there. That doesn't mean you won't find a job. I guess the thing that you don't want to be is you don't want to be 5 years from here and still be like, oh yeah, I graduated from this boot camp. That's bad news bears. You know, it's fine to have it on your resume for now. It's fine to bring it up. I think it really shows like you've got dedication to like learning something. These classes are not easy. But also don't expect like, oh, I graduated from a boot camp. Yeah, we'll make you senior. Or yeah, you can lead our team. That's just not realistic, right? But a lot of these places that are looking for junior dev roles, it'll say like 2 to 3 years experience. You don't really need 2 to 3 years experience. Apply to every single one of those jobs. And yeah, you might end up competing with each other, but if one of you gets in, well, then that's just kind of an in for you later on when another position opens up. Stay connected to everyone too. Yeah. And demo day. So I believe demo day is going to be a little bit different this semester than it's been in the past. In the past, we had people come to the class. It sounds like they're going to be remoting in. I need to ask JP a little more details about that because I just found out. But yeah, you know, we'll still have our presentations and we'll still be going through everything. Probably. I don't think I got an email about that. I did see an announcement about it.
Yeah, he said, yeah, it's called Project.
But that's
May
another
16th.
one.
That's the second one.
It's actually on Saturday. Other opportunity.
Gotcha.
I think the one on the 16th is more like come and talk. Tell them about your project.
Okay, so yeah, in the past, what they've had is they've had like everyone set up screens and they have their projects on them, and some recruiters and some places that are hiring will come by, and maybe 1 or 2 people have gotten jobs through it. Most people don't, but it's nice to at least be able to talk to some of these people and start to ask them questions about what they do at their job or what kind of skills they're looking for. It just gives you an opportunity to talk to real life recruiters and team leads and people who make hiring decisions. No homework from now till the end, except for the homework that is due on Sunday and the project, because that's homework. Lightning talks, yeah, we talked about that. We will be doing them. You will be learning more stuff, but they won't be the core focus of the class. Like, we won't be sending out exercises. It's kind of just like, here's what you need to know about this topic. Like, I taught myself to crochet. Teach yourself Webpack. Teach yourself more about React Router. Teach yourself, what are you teaching yourself right now, Francis? What? MobX? See, I don't even know what that is, so I got something to learn. How about you, Winnie? What are you learning? You're what? Dart? Also don't know what that is. See, so there's like tons to learn out there, and I should probably know what both of these things are. But again, the field is huge. There's never going to be a point where you can just be like, I know web development. There's never going to be the Keanu Reeves, I know Kung Fu moment. You will continually have to learn in order to like stay up to date. Web dev is a highly competitive field, and it pays well. That's part of the reason why it stays highly competitive, is because people like to get paid. But yeah, the key to hireability is and relevance is to constantly be learning. You know, my coworker, when they said they didn't know what Webpack was, but they're a front-end developer, I kind of worry for them when they're out in the job market because they should probably know what Webpack is by now. It's been around for a few years. It's kind of like the go-to tool for asset pipelines in JavaScript world. It's a little bit worrisome that they haven't even heard of it. So definitely read Hacker News, read Reddit. That's right, read Reddit. And just keep learning, keep doing tutorials. For example, you know which tutorial I want to do next? Truffle Framework Ethereum Overview. Like, I know nothing about this, but I want to learn it. So what am I going to do? I'm going to stare at this documentation and go to the next part once I finish this one, right? They've got a whole list of tutorials. I'm going to like start here and then go there and then go there. My first D app. So I'm just going to do this until it makes sense. Because at some point, it will make sense. And it's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be over a week. I've been told it takes 8 months for computer science topics to really sink in. And for web dev, it took me about 8 months for web development to start to make sense. With machine learning, it has taken like 1.5 years before it has finally started to make sense. And with Ethereum development, I'm sure it'll probably take another 4 or so months because I started learning it last year. These concepts are not easy. They're not easy. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of frustration. I cry a lot. Like, you think I'm joking, but I'm not. So, you know, it's just what it is. You know, it's like, in this class, never. But yeah, you know, you will get so frustrated and fed up. There will be days where, like, even once you do get a job, it doesn't stop there. There will be days where you'll be like, this isn't worth it. You're like, why do I put up with this? But then there will be days where you're like, I'm a god. And you'll just feel amazing. So it's probably similar to how you have felt in this class, where like suddenly a concept clicks and you're just like, yes, I know everything. These boot camps are also set up in a way to where we never really let you feel that way for too long. We continue to show you new concepts and new topics. So this boot camp might even be not really representative of what it will be like for you in the future. I guarantee you will have less frustration in the future because you won't be learning as many new concepts all at once. You'll be concentrated on like a single thing rather than everything. So definitely keep learning. I've hammered that in enough. Okay, your challenge, prove yourself. You know this tech. I'm sure some stuff is fuzzy. Now's your chance to get rid of that fuzz. Now is the chance for you to like start taking what you know, applying it to a real project, and build something that, you know, it doesn't have to like matter in like in terms of like, oh, you've got to build an app that's going to save all pets, but you should build something that's complex enough to where you wouldn't have been able to even think about building it at the beginning of this class. Excuses, they're like butts. Everyone has one, and they all stink. There is a much vulgar version of this that everyone can imagine. You know, the excuse I keep hearing here is Matt sucks. I'm sure he didn't, but that doesn't mean you should quit web development, right? Just because you had a sour experience for a couple months doesn't mean like suddenly you don't want to learn web dev anymore. It might have been frustrating, and I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was really frustrating. But at the end of the day, at this point, y'all know enough to where you can get past that. So no excuses. Ask questions. That's a pro tip right there. Ask questions. Scott, I know I don't need to worry about you when it comes to asking questions. You've got that part down. But keep doing it. It's a very good thing to have. All right, so we've basically got like 3.5 weeks for y'all to figure out your projects. By Saturday, you should have a good idea of what you want to build, and that way next Monday, you can really just hit the ground running and just build it. Right, you got all the skills you need. You know databases. You're going to store your data there. You know Express and Node. That's how you're going to run your servers. You know React. You know jQuery. That's how you're going to build your front end. Probably not going to use jQuery for this one. I hope not, because you are required to use React. And if you're using React, why do you need jQuery? You have a team of skilled developers. You will build that team once I'm done talking. And you have experts willing to help. You have the fabulous Winnie, the marvelous Francis, and me. So yes, now we will be building stuff, and that's where you're going to learn. So all of that fuzz that's in there about concepts, it's not going to go away until you build a site and you run into the errors that you will run into, and you're going to have to Google and Stack Overflow. And if you haven't asked a question on Stack Overflow yet, this project is going to be a good time to ask your first question on Stack Overflow. Obviously, we'll help you, but I want to encourage self-teaching and getting the answers yourself at this point, because that's what's really going to be important for you out there. So what do we expect? For it to have utility. Yes?
I just wanted to mention that Naveed's going to make a link for all of us, so we can all stay there.
There you
know
go.
that I had agreed to that. I guess.
There's also a Trilogy UCLA alumni Slack, which I've been talking about this for like 1.5 years. It turns out it existed the entire time. I was like, we should really have one of these, and just no one told me it existed. So we'll make sure to invite all you, and not only will you be connected to each other, you'll be connected to other alums, which also, I think there's like 300 people in there. A lot of them are employed. A lot of them post job postings. It's not like such a bad community to be active in. Like there's this guy from last semester, Nam Ho. He posts in there all the time. And he's always just posting new articles about Go. Did he learn Go in this class? No, but at the end of it, he started picking up books and teaching himself. Do I know Go? No. I want to learn it, and if I want to learn it, I'm going to go ask Nam Ho where to start. So definitely, yeah, we'll get you invited to that once you have finished your final projects. Okay, so have utility for this. You know, I think Nick has a friend who wants him to build a site that he can sell t-shirts on. I think that would be a perfect thing to do for this final project. If you happen to have a potential client, you have everything you need to build a real website. It might not be such a bad thing for your final project. It doesn't just have to be like a toy project anymore. You can put all the skills you have into use on building something that you can get paid for. You should pay your teammates if you're all working on it. Don't just hoard the money. Or do something pro bono, right? Like maybe my mom sells photography photos. So if I were trying to find a new job, I would build her a photography site. I'm not such a great son, so I haven't done that yet. But maybe you're a great child and you can build your parents something, right? You know, maybe the world doesn't need Dinder, which is Tinder for dogs, right? So build something that makes sense. What? I just made it up.
Oh, it is a real thing. It's not called that.
That does Tinder for dogs?
Yeah, but it connects you with dogs available for adoption.
For breeding or Adoption. I could imagine like doing like dog breeding that way. Be like, oh, this Yorkie matches perfectly. Whatever. Yeah. So these are kind of things you'll want to do for your presentation. So if you have a website that does T-shirts, you know, you when you do your presentation, you'll just want to know about other sites that sell T-shirts and explain how yours is unique. Put time and thought into it. Report problems. Don't wait until the last week to say, oh, I haven't been able to connect to my database. Do that like on Saturday. Do that on Monday. Do that super, super early. That way, you're not just stuck trying to connect to a database for 3 weeks. You can actually make progress. We want you to use some sort of project management system. Some people use Trello. There's like Jira, but I think you have to pay for Jira. I would suggest using GitHub Issues. I'll show you what GitHub Issues is if you haven't already used it. But basically, you'll create tickets, you'll create tasks, and you'll have all your tasks in your to-do column. And as each of you start working on particular features, you'll pull that task into in progress. And then once you finish it, you can move it over to done. So you want to use one of these just so that you kind of get a real life experience. Any dev team in the real world will use some sort of project management system. Lots of them use Jira or Pivotal Tracker. I know teams that use sticky notes. Like they have a board of sticky notes and they have like a sticky note of to do. And then they're like, okay, I'm moving this one into in progress. And like they do a physical move. That might not be so great for y'all because you don't really have like a board. But every dev team has some sort of project management process. So definitely just use Trello, use GitHub Issues, or GitHub Projects, whatever it's called. Waffle? Yeah, there's Waffle. I don't. Does it hook into the projects thing? Or, you know, there's like the projects tab on GitHub. Does it hook into there and display in there? Or is it? Okay. Has integrations with GitHub. Yeah, use Waffle. I'm sure there's more tools out there. There's probably more than you can shake your stick at. This TripleByte, which is like a online recruiting service. If you get an interview with them through Google, I hear you may or may not have to build out your own version of Trello within like an hour and a half. I'm sure a lot of those people who built out Trello for that have their own version of Trello online. I'll show you all Trello and project management stuff later. And yes, read into the documentation, look at Stack Overflow, look at Reddit, Hacker News, Google. If you're definitely ask questions, but if you haven't Googled your question first, I'm going to tell you to Google it and then come back to me in 10 minutes. Unless you found your answer. You know, maybe you'll find your answer in those 10 minutes. Requirements. Must use React.js or Angular. I would highly suggest not using Angular because we didn't teach it. Yeah, in some way. So your entire application does not need to be React, but you must use it. You know, maybe you have a some sort of list component that you can create stuff, read stuff, update stuff, delete stuff. Maybe you use React for that part, and then you deal with the rest of your site using jQuery or something. You must use Node with Express. There are other web servers out there. There's Koa, which is also written by the same guy as Express.js, TJ Holloway Chuck. There's also Sales.js. There's Happy, I believe, is another web server, but that web server happens to be specifically for API development. But for us, we've concentrated on Express, what you should use for this one. I would suggest looking at Koa after class and try to build a simple application with it. It makes quite a lot of use of async await syntax and generators. So it'll still be a challenge to create the same project that you've already created, but using Koa rather than Express. You must use an ORM this time. Last time it was optional. This time you've got to use it. You must have all 4 CRUD methods. What does CRUD stand for? Everyone should know this by now. Wait, what's the last one? What did you say, Lisa? There it is, delete. Thank you, too. Yeah, so you've got to do all of your CRUD methods, which will also correspond to all of your RESTful verbs, right? Get, post, put, delete. That would take care of this one right here. You must deploy it. If you are having trouble deploying to Heroku, let us know. We will help you out. We will walk you through that. It might not be a 10-minute fix, so it's better you bring these issues up early. Like with Scott, we got to figure out why he's getting that headers issue. I've never seen that before. Francis probably hasn't seen that before. Winnie probably hasn't seen that before. But I guarantee you, digging into Stack Overflow and Google, we'll stumble upon something that will give us the hint as to what's wrong. So definitely, if you're having trouble deploying to Heroku, let us know early. 2 libraries, packages, or technologies that we have not discussed. Maybe rather than using Bootstrap, you use Materialize. Maybe you use Foundation, right? That would count as a single library. And there you go. That makes your styling life easier. You don't have to style everything from scratch. You can use these pre-built styled components. What's another good library package or technology? Maybe you want to use Socket.io. Maybe you want to set up a chat with your application. That would be a good choice. Any library or technology could work. Last semester, someone made an Alexa app to go with their project. You can write Alexa apps with JavaScript. It's surprisingly easy. They basically give you these, I think the word is intentions. So if I say, Alexa, open the shaker, it gives you like the intention of that statement, and you can use these intentions to run specific functions. So that is not out of this world. Someone also did it's called OCR, optical character recognition. Is that right? Yeah. There's a JavaScript package which will accept a text file or a photo of text and give you the digital text back. It'll give you a string with the actual text. So they did that for their application. Someone else learned React Native and deployed their code to iOS. These are all things you can do. They will not be easy. None of these things I'm talking about are easy. But they were able to do them because they basically spent night and day combing through the documentation. The instructors weren't really much help for this Alexa application, but we were at least able to help them look at the right pieces of documentation or maybe help them work through specific logic. So if you are going to take on one of these advanced pieces of tech, be prepared for us to not know anything about it and to explain some stuff to us. And we'll be able to help you work through your problem. It must allow for or involve the authentication of users in some way. I would highly suggest using Passport.js. That will make your life a little bit easier. JD is going to be covering it in his next session. Okay, maybe not. It might be a good thing to have a lightning talk on. Session management with Passport is not so difficult. You really just add like a couple lines of code here and there, and then it just all kind of connects up. Getting auth set up is not easy, but once it's set up, then you don't really have to worry about it. What else here? Polished front-end UI. I don't want to see a non-styled page. At least use Bootstrap, right? At least make it presentable. Imagine you were going to try and show this to a client. If you showed your client an unstyled input field, they'd be like, what the F is this? Don't do that for this project. Go the extra mile, style your stuff. Even just raw Bootstrap, that's not styled enough. Like, maybe get a Bootstrap theme and apply it to your code so it doesn't just look like raw Bootstrap. Like, make it custom in some way. Use MVC, right? That kind of goes hand in hand with setting up your CRUD services, right? And using your ORM. And, you know, just have good quality code, right? Like, you shouldn't have tabs and spaces mixed. You shouldn't have, like, everything all the way to the left, right? If you have a anonymous function, the stuff in the anonymous function should be indented 1 tab or 2 spaces or whatever y'all agree upon. You know, name your variables well. Don't just name an instance of a book var b. Use, you know, var book, right? Make it a little bit easier for someone who comes into your code later on. Yeah, do what you want. If you are thinking what you're gonna do is too complex to complete in the next 3.5 weeks, talk to us, and you know, we'll let you know if it seems reasonable or if it seems like you're gonna just be way too stressed. But yeah, if you have an idea and want to run with it, we're not gonna stop you. No excuses. No one's gonna want to hear an excuse out in the real world. You know, if your client isn't happy with your work, they just won't pay you. Which is also why I would suggest if you're doing freelance work, make them pay half up front. Because that way, at least, you're getting paid something for the time you might have spent. Deliverables. So here's your deliverables. April 21st. Plan, design, and research. You know, that's Saturday. That's this Saturday. So try and have stuff ready to go by Saturday. We'll give you Saturday to continue designing and researching. The following week, you should have a working application. It doesn't need to be fully complete. You might be missing some things, like maybe you don't have auth yet, or maybe like your React application is still acting wonky, but definitely have something working. You might have an unstyled form at this point, right? Maybe you have your form allowing you to submit your resource to the server. Again, doesn't need to be complete next Saturday, but you should have a good start. May 5th should be polished up. You know, if you've got your MVP going already and you're already like well on your way, maybe start reaching for your stretch goals, right? If you were building a I don't know, maybe if you were, I don't know, have some stretch goals in mind, go for them the 3rd week if you've completed your application. I can't think of a good example right now. I can think of an example involving a game, but a game, like Simon says, is not complex enough for your 3rd project. And then the last Saturday is presenting. So I would suggest making a demo video. You know, do a screen cap. That way you don't have to worry about bugs in your demo. I don't know how many times I've been presenting stuff to like my bosses, and then all of a sudden in the middle of my demo something breaks because someone happened to push to my, and environment, 10 minutes before the demo. And now my demo doesn't work because someone added a comma where it wasn't supposed to be. So yeah, that's kind of the outline, right? This Saturday should be planning, designing, researching. Really like put some thought into this. Definitely don't try and wait until the last week. So yeah, deliverable number 1, the intended application, just an overview for it, maybe why you think it'll be useful. We want to see these screen-by-screen design layouts. So I believe a lot of you did this last time where you had each of your different pages written up, like you had basic wireframes. And you had ideas as far as like, what lists would go where and where your login would be and what page transitions to another page. Have this all thought out before you start building out your application. It'll make your life a lot easier if you know what you're going towards before you just start coding. Have like a front-end team and a back-end team. Maybe your back-end team is split into like routing and delivering your APIs, and then you have another person working on like your database integration for your backend. On your front end, maybe you have someone doing styling, and then the other person could be doing like some more complex JavaScript. Or maybe you have your 2 front-end people doing complex JavaScript and styling, right? Bless you. Yeah, a schedule for completion of various tasks. You should have a good idea of when you're going to be finished with each task, right? Like setting up your database, maybe that should be done within the first week, right? If you need to have an MVP by the end of the 2nd week, probably need your database finished pretty early, or at least have your schema thought out by then, and you can start working on your Mongoose models or your SQLwise models. And yeah, get a screenshot of your project management board. The 3rd one in here would be Waffle. Do something like this, right? So here we've got our user login screen. When we log in, it takes us to our home screen. We see that we have like measurements. You can add measurements. We have a different home screen. We can sync our measurements. We have various different screens, right? This is the same screen. This is viewing, this is syncing, this is like some sort of results. You should think about your application in this much detail, right? If you've got a screen meant for displaying amount of time played, maybe you use like charts.js to show the time that they spent. Charts.js, I believe, is I think it's a Google thing. I don't know. Some sort of open source library. Charts.js would be an excellent topic or an excellent library that we have not covered in class. That could count as a new tech. Know about your data flow, right? So yeah, so this user, they get presented with a user login, and it'll take them to one of these 3 views. Probably take you to the last one that they were viewing. Maybe it sets some sort of cookie on the browser to say like, oh, we were last at the self-reporting page. So if that's where they last were, and you can read that cookie off their browser, maybe you show them that page first. These two pieces of data can go into the user health, so knowing their weight, their blood pressure, glucose, steps walked, right? So if we look back here, you'll see that it's basically an explanation of these forms. But then it says what to do with it, deliver it to the cloud. This is kind of like the data flow, whereas this is the UI UX, right? There's nothing about how the data should be delivered to your server here. This is just like what stuff should look like. But when you click this button, like if you have a button you should know what that button's going to do. It should talk to some endpoint. It should clear out the table. I don't know. Questions? Oh, yeah. Yes, you may. Cool. We'll come back at 9, and then let's make sure everyone's got a group, and then we can just talk about whatever y'all want to talk about. Okay. Cool. Let's see if we can get that error figured out. Unless you want to go on break, that's fine if you want to go on break.
Yeah.
I was wondering why people were leaving in the middle of class. It's because it was like way past 8, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think we deployed the books.
Yes.
Okay. I just redid everything.
Okay.
So.
Oh.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one before.
In a way.
Way back.
But it did, like, when we searched for that error, there was like a ton of results for it. So it's definitely something that
I think I looked on log.
Well, actually, you know, that not found is kind of a good sign. It means your application has deployed correctly. Because that's an express error that you got back. Right? That's different than the application error that Heroku normally shows you when it didn't deploy. So it's definitely deploying something. I'm curious. So I realized you could put that application.
Yeah.
Oh, and you can really make sense. I've only ever like done that stuff. It's terrible. So what's the file or directory stat app?
Now, one thing I did, there was something about putting a proxy. Stop trying to spend the database on doing.
That's only when you're running both servers locally. Because the proxy would go in the client.
I've never done that.
It's probably already in there. So I bet you if you go to client package.json, I bet you we can just set you up with it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it is in there. Okay.
That's how.
Sure.
Because,
I understand why. I just thought maybe was that missing because I didn't see it. That was about it.
Yeah, that's just for the.
Let's see.
I have a feeling the express static isn't working correctly because I'm not so sure that it looks like it's looking in /app client build index.html. So
Here's the index.
there's the index, but where is that located? That's in client build index.html.
Yeah.
I
didn't touch it.
Yeah, because you shouldn't need to for Roku. The only reason you needed to touch it was just because GitHub Pages has like weird.
And there's another whole
instructions.
GitHub thing that you can say GitHub-pages and then a path. And then when it builds, it'll actually include that. It's some weird thing when you try to get a build, it like pops up. It's like, usually GitHub Pages.
It shows you.
Yeah, it's something. So it must be. Again,
That probably takes care of that for you. Like the thing that I was doing. Go to server.js. I have a suspicion that the express looks like it should be right. It's client build. That should be right. What happens when you run git status?
Really?
Oh, that's all our
Do you also have this repo in GitHub
Me and my
or no?
coworker are trying to figure out this puzzle.
Okay.
It's like you have this board, the grid, and then you have these colored pins, and then these colored pieces. So first you put the colored pins in, then you have to make these colored pieces fit in perfectly in that grid. And I gave up, he figured it out. But then right after that, I went to go play another game.
That sounds good.
Then we had what we put on one of the games.
Oh.
Yeah, it's really chill. And
I see what's going on. So you have a Git repository initialized within the client, as well as
Okay.
in the server. So that's probably what's getting
Did I just make you?
getting things all
No,
weird.
I'm thinking
Um,
I don't know if I can do that, but like.
Yeah, so you can do rm-rf.git,
I think I have like dinner
and that
and like I don't
basically deletes the GitHub repository. And then if you go back up to server, and then you do git add dot or dash.
Why is it not? It
So-
doesn't pop up. Everyone's telling me they request it.
Status.
But they pop up.
Oh, really?
It's just
Yeah, I don't know how to, like,
it's
set
changing. Nothing.
Oh, I-
An alert or something?
I get no notification.
What if you go to the group? Do you see something?
Well, it didn't even put any changes.
It should, okay.
I would have expected changes to occur. Do you have a git ignore?
I asked to join the group.
Yay. Okay, I'm gonna get. I don't know.
I don't know where it is.
Should be in here.
Bye.
Yeah, it should be. Or it should be in this root directory. So you just
Everyone's requesting
space
to add it.
dot git ignore. Okay.
I have a global.
Do you have a git ignore in the client directory? No, we would have seen that right below .git. So this is just the toy application, right?
Yeah,
You
but
know what I
I've
would
had
do?
zero success with.
I would.
I mean, I have some things deployed.
I would rmrf the git repo for the server. So rmrf.git, and then just do git init. I have a feeling it probably initialized client as a submodule, and Heroku apparently doesn't work well with this. So now if you do git add git status, and does it have client? Yeah, it's got all your client stuff. It's got your client build, perfect. So now you should be able to commit, and you'll have to add the Heroku remote again, because we deleted .git, it deleted your remotes. But yeah, first commit remote add.
I can do Heroku. Oh, no, I can't do it because it's already been initialized.
Yeah. Git remote add. No colon, space Heroku, and then that'll be the Git link in your Heroku dashboard. So if you go back to Heroku.
Oh, yeah, I know what it is.
Well, I would like.
I've looked at it so many times, I don't remember.
Yeah, but there's like
The whole
stuff
movie.
for it too.
okay.
Just go to settings.
We want to get-
Yeah, so that's what you want. Because it
I've deployed
definitely
from
ends
Git
with that.
before. I've like added Git as a repository.
Oh, really? Like
connect to
just
GitHub. So as soon as you push it to GitHub, it's
automatically does it. That's smart. Especially so like if you're really following the rule of what's in master is what's on production, tools like that are super helpful for when you just merge a pull request, it automatically deploys. There's kind of less steps for you to do. But that's also dangerous because any single time you merge to master, then you deploy your live application.
Hopefully it's Dev, right?
Yes.
So then this happens.
Git, push Heroku space master. So Heroku is the name of the origin, and then the last argument is the branch you want to push. And
Now there's stuff up there already.
Yeah, do git push -f Heroku master, which stands for force. Normally you want to do that, but because what's up there is kind of wonky.
Pulling things from
And you'd be
And
pulling
I-
like the wrong
yeah.
thing too. It would have the submodule version, which would be. I'm surprised Heroku doesn't know how to handle submodules. It probably does if they have a GitHub repo that's public. But if it's a submodule within its own module, that's probably like
I've
having issues
found,
with.
you know what I've had no trouble with is when you kill Control C out of npm start, it says, stop 3001, stop 3000, exit to 0. Like it shut down both of those services because you're not running the Express and you're also not running whatever the React but it still runs sometimes in the background because I close out of one and then I go to another window and I open up and they work and I close those and another one open.
And then it'll be
Kill
like
those and all of a sudden there's
something's
one
on
running,
the
2001's in use. Then I have to do.
I've noticed that, like,
new
that
command.
happens to a lot of Nick. Nick's always like, why is this not running?
Yeah,
I
now
honestly don't know why. It's gotta be a bug.
they're not checking that the process.
Oh, really?
So I do this LSO.
That was very
Yeah,
this was
that's the
like-
command. It shows you ports in use
Yeah.
and the process ID associated with them. That's the command. Someone showed this to me last semester, and like I can never remember it. I get so used to looking stuff up by process name, which is useful if you know the process name. But sometimes you don't.
It seems to be under running.
Yeah, but like there's been times where I've had to search for just something that was running on that port, not knowing what it was, and it's like impossible to find using the thing that I normally do, which is
Wherever
PS
he goes
Office.
on route for
That's how you find stuff like port. That's a good tool to have.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, lots of little things that can go wrong with deployment.
Yeah, I found there's a lot of, without knowing all the ins and outs of everything, kind of just restarting stuff, like reinitializing.
Yeah, if you don't know what you did wrong, starting from scratch is like generally not such a bad idea. The only bad side is you have to reinitialize everything, which is a little time consuming, but probably less time consuming than debugging what else
Yeah.
went wrong, right? Cool, take a break. Sorry for like holding y'all hostage. I wasn't paying attention to the time.
No, that's fine. I figured you had forgotten.
I totally.
And you were pretty like in the zone with your motivational speech. So I was like, I'll let him keep going. I needed that in my life too. So.
Yeah.
After we heard the crying part, we couldn't let it
Sorry to bore y'all with stories of how I just cry myself to sleep every night.
It looks like a good cry.
Yeah, man. Sometimes it just relieves the stress.
Just let it out.
I may or may not have been an emo kid.
Deathbed?
Yeah. Still.
Still deathbed.
Yeah, and that too. Embarrassingly enough, I learned about them from the Spider-Man movie.
Oh, yeah.
We learned about who?
Dashboard. Yeah.
I'm interested in like the science behind like the emotion of being sad and how that triggers a physical reaction with tears and all that.
It is weird when you think about it, isn't it? I don't
Did you
understand.
know that people are more prone to being emotional on airplanes?
Really?
Yeah, because like I noticed when I travel recently, I just get like so sad when the trip is over. I start like crying on the plane, and apparently that's a thing that like
Really?
get more emotional. Also, they want movies on planes.
The tears,
Yeah.
they're
just
real.
can't.
Oh, Luigi does some behavioral science stuff. I wonder if you could explain it to us. You might know.
Join the LinkedIn group. I posted it on general.
Oh, you actually?
Yeah.
Oh. By the way, if y'all haven't added me on LinkedIn yet,
That's why I want you to join the group so we can all do it.
yeah, just add me. And if I still, like, if I forget to respond, like, I have a whole list of people who have added me on LinkedIn that are in limbo because I don't want to ignore them. Most of them are recruiters. So I figure if I'm on the job search, I'm going to accept them all and spam them and be like, hey, I need a job. So if you get lost in limbo, just bug me. I will join.
We already got full numbers. Pretty poppin' group.
It's in general, you said?
Yep.
There it is.
Yeah, for some reason I have to add it. Yeah, I figured out how to do it.
I didn't even know you could, like, make groups. Me? Yeah.
That's what your LinkedIn says.
Yes, I did. I was not a web developer for the majority of my life. For now. At some point, I won't be able to say that anymore.
Is this security and stuff?
Oh, yeah. There, no, it's Webpack. Shameless plug for Ethereum.
Yeah, dude, I'm like starting right now.
Yeah, sorry for holding
No,
that.
it's all right.
If I start talking and no one holds me to the time, I'll just keep talking. I don't really eating this. That's why I'm so skinny.
I know if I don't eat now, I won't eat when I get home because I don't like to eat like past the box.
Charlie, are you like into really silent?
Am I into what?
Silent.
So no, I had heard that they there was some like weird stuff at one of their factories, and so I was like, I don't know if I really want to try it. I'll just eat. I just eat when I get home. It makes it hard to go to sleep late, but I don't know. I like trying to do meal prep because I eat lunch out generally, so I eat dinner at home. My coworkers drink Soylent, and like all the time.
Yeah.
I just think it's the weirdest
It's
thing.
so gross.
You've tried it?
No, I've tried it, but I just like tasted it. It's a lot. It's stinky. No,
Like body or
Yeah,
like weird.
yeah.
And like does it taste like in sugar or
I don't know
or
what
is
it
it sugar? Like
It just like tastes like
It
it kind of tastes like
Yeah.
waffle mix. It's basically like a meal replacement.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. That's what I'm
Sorry,
saying.
I've heard of wheat cereal.
Have you heard of like Tim Ferriss by chance? He's like some blogger, author, I guess. He's written multiple books. He lived on Soylent for like a week and a half or 2 weeks or something. That was all he ate, drank. And like, he wanted to test their claim, like that's all you need. And he was like, yeah, I was fine. I was able to focus. I don't feel like totally out of it. He's like, but I don't particularly enjoy it. He's like, I enjoy eating real food. But it's interesting that I wonder like if you did that for a year, like what, yeah, would your liver still function correctly, or like would you suddenly have like heart palpitations, or like, you know, it doesn't seem
You're not
right.
supposed to eat it all the time.
Well, but they
Supposedly
claim
you can like
Yeah.
live off of it.
Oh,
That's all you need?
Yeah, that's their claim to fame.
Damn.
it's just vegetable based.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest it. I wouldn't try it.
That'd be such a boring diet.
Yeah, and that's what the guy ended up saying. He was like, you know, it's nice for like when you have to skip a meal because you're super busy. He was like, but if you really tried to live on it the way they say you can, he's like, just enjoy life. Food's too good to give up. Has like all the proteins you need, I guess. It is.
I'm gonna look this up now. Now I'm very curious.
You can get mixed with coffee too, so you don't have to drink coffee anymore.
Oh, I can just escape everything in one thing, huh? This is my life right here. I'll drink this cup and I'll be good.
I think that's it for lecture. I think that was all we really had planned for the day. The rest was really just getting y'all situated with groups, and you can ask any questions as far as like any lingering questions that you might have.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you have like a recommended way to get started? Like, do you all decide, okay, we're gonna start working on like one feature in the front end and back end, are all working on the same thing at the same time?
So I would first start with figure out what you want to build. Once you know what you want to build, I would come over here to projects or use Waffle or Trello and create a new project and figure out, okay, so what's the project board name? Let's call it final project, right? Seems like a good name. Project description, tasks for finishing the final project. Maybe I'm gonna build a, so for templates, I would use Kanban. It has to do, in progress, and done, which is basically what you have, right? You have to do tasks, you have tasks in progress, and you have tasks that are done. So you can come here, you can create a project. For y'all that are missing, if you come to the projects tab, this is how you do project management. You give your board a name, you give the board a description. You can have your own columns and your own settings and everything, but Kanban's pretty classic. You have a to-do column, an in-progress column, and a done column. And then, you know, there's like this automated version, which I don't really know what that is. I don't use this tool. But if I ran a startup, I probably would. Yeah, I mean, it's different than Pivotal, but not much. I mean, you've got like different tasks here, and you can order them. So like cards at the top are the top priority. Maybe we're gonna make a dog finding application, right? So first step, find dog availability API, right? Like, where are we even gonna get our data from? Set up database, right? So, you know, you might even argue that this isn't detailed enough, right? So you can say like, so you can edit it and say, you know, set up database. Should be Mongo or SQL, depending upon what you want to do, right? Let's delete these other ones. Delete. 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 What else do we need? Create wireframes. And what else do we want to do? I would order these in terms of what needs to be done first, right? So set up your wireframes. That's the very first thing you want to do, right? Know which pages you want to build out. Know what data you're going to need. So create data model flow. Show where, figure out where to, or how to structure your data. How to structure your data. Where's the data coming from? So, you might work on these tasks in parallel, right? So your front end team could probably start on the wireframes, and you'd move that into in progress, and you'd be like, okay, now I have started on my wireframes. Let's put them here. But by building out these tasks, you'll start to have an idea of what you'll need to do to build out your entire project. Add authentication, right? Can we do that before we've set up our database? No. So we'll move that down below, right? Can we set up our database before we even know what data we want to store? No. So you'd pull this into progress, right? Maybe once you have the pictures of your wireframe all finished up, you would move this into done, right? And you can store your wireframes in your Git repo. Maybe just have like a wireframes directory. So that's what I would do. Really just start to build out these tasks and do it in as much detail as you can. If you know that someone is going to have to research React Materialize because you want to use Materialize rather than Bootstrap, learn to use React Materialize. That would be a task. But that's going to happen probably way down the line, right? Wouldn't you need to even build out your basic pages first? So, build home page. Maybe authentication. Probably don't want to push off authentication until too late in the game, but it's definitely not the first thing you're doing. What's another task we could do for my dog application? Find display dog breeds to user. As a user on the dog breeds page, we should see dog breeds available. So this form, as a user on the dog breeds page, we should see dog breeds available. If you're following proper project management, the way to write your tickets is you say, as a type of user, as an admin, as a new user, as a partner who feeds us data, right? As a type of user, on the particular piece of the application that you're working at, on the home page, on the details page, on the contact page. And then you follow it up with the action that you want them to take. So in this case, we should see the dog breeds available. So you should be able to read these stories or tasks and get a gist of what you'll actually need to do and who it will be relevant to. That's what a good project manager will set tasks up like. Different project managers have their own rules of thumb, but from what I've seen, this seems to be the generic go-to. You say, as what type of user, where in the application, what we want to do. And if you structure your stories that way, you'll have to ask yourself questions about your application and what's going to go into it. Pivotal Labs, like, they have enough details in their stories where supposedly, as a Pivotal Labs developer, you can pick any story off of their task board, and from the description, write unit tests. And then once you've written your unit tests, you can then fill out the code so that your tests go from red to green, and then they refactor. So Pivotal Labs is very big on what they call extreme programming, which is based off of this book by Kent Beck, I believe his name is. Extreme Programming. Kent Beck. You know, and it's basically the, not just agile, but pair programming, TDD, agile software development. So, you know, rather than having like a waterfall system where it's like, you have to finish your databases, then you have to do the models, then you have to do the form at the bottom. It's like, well, maybe we can do all three in parallel. And once we have all three pieces completed independently, we have a task to like put them all together. Whereas waterfall would say, do step one, then step two, then step three. Agile is more like, you can do steps 1 through 3 together, and then maybe have a fourth task to like make it a little more cohesive. Supposedly, Disney follows extreme programming, and maybe in another department they do, but we definitely don't practice pair programming. Therefore, in my mind, it is not extreme programming. But you'll hear people talk about these buzzwords, and that's what they are. They're buzzwords. But yeah, this is like the book. If you happen to be interested in working for Pivotal Labs, give this a read. It's a good company to work for. They've got offices all over the world. It's kind of intense to get a job there, actually. They make you do like an 8-hour interview where you basically go and work there for a day, and then they decide whether or not to hire you. I personally think that's, like, I don't know if they pay you for that day or if they just expect you to be there for free. But I don't know. I think it's kind of a jip if they're not paying you. I know they do if you're an intern. I don't know what they have to do as far as if they're interviewing you, right? Like, I don't know what the law is there. I bet you, I'd be willing to bet they don't pay you. I don't know. Maybe they do. Have either of you interviewed for Pivotal Labs or know anyone who has? It's a really cool company. They really produce like solid software. And there is a method to it, and that method is extreme programming. It's hard to get buy-in on that from product managers, though, because the second you tell a project manager that we're going to start pair programming, they're going to be like, why would we put 2 devs on a single task when we can put 2 devs on 2 tasks? They're like, we can increase our velocity that way. And to some extent, they have a good argument. But the great thing about pair programming is you have 2 sets of eyes on your code, which means people are discussing the code before they're implementing it, which means they're actually really thinking about what they're putting down versus just like, oh yeah, I could do things this way. Oh, that doesn't work. So like, yeah, you might get an initial thing built out maybe a little bit quicker if you're not doing pair programming or not doing TDD, but the time spent debugging code later on, when you don't have tests and when you're not doing pair programming, will eventually take more time than it would have taken had you just done TDD and pair programmed from the first place. You will produce many less bugs through pair programming and TDD. I'm kind of rambling about PDD and Pivotal Labs and how I think they're great, but I don't really work for them either, because pair programming for 8 hours a day sounds rough. I don't know if I really, like, I enjoy having my headphones on. But yeah, that's cool stuff. And then as far as, where to start, yeah, definitely, first off, know what you want to build. That's generally the hardest thing, is like deciding what you want to build, but have that ready to go by Saturday. Also, does everyone have groups already? Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting some yes and no's. What are our groups? Let's get this on a sheet of paper. This sheet of paper. Well, we can make it a different color. Color. We'll make it gray. No, that's sad. Purple?
No.
We'll go back to yellow. All right. Groups. Okay. Group 1. Who's group 1? Jesse?
Me, Raffle, Marcelo, and Evan.
Raphael?
Ben.
Oh, okay. Benjamin. I don't know if I spelled that right. I'm probably going to spell everyone's name wrong. Who were the other two?
Marcelo,
And Evan. Group Uno. Who's group Uno? Because we're not having 1, 2, 3, and 4. You're all A's and 1s and alphas to me. You're all awesome. So who's group Uno? McKenna. Who else? Alvin?
David, and Randall.
David. And Randall.
We also have
And cool. I believe that.
I feel like this is Josh.
You forgot the W.
Getting picked.
We're not.
Not getting picked. And who else?
Nick.
Nick. That's right. All right. Group Alpha. We got who's that? Robel? Yes, it is. Cindy. Joseph? Navid. Ooh. Navid.
Can we throw Joseph in there?
No, we're gonna try to stick to groups of 4. So he can be your spirit animal. All right. Group. I don't know. What? Group 1.
What did you get confused with group 1 and group 1?
There's group number 1. Uno. All right. So who's group 1? Not number 1. Group 1. Jesse, Alvin. Jesse.
It's gonna get so confusing.
Alvin. Well, you can name your groups whatever you want. Scott, maybe. Julie and Ryan. Cool. Julie and Ryan. All right. Group Ein. Eins. Scott. Who have we got in our chat? Scott, do you know who's going to be in your group?
No.
Luigi, do you want to be with Scott? It sounds like you do. Luigi. See, awesome. All right. Who else? I know we're missing Karina, but I feel like we haven't seen her in class for a long time. I know we're also missing John, but I also feel like we haven't seen him in class for a while. People who have been remote a lot, I would like to put together.
I don't want to carry it anymore.
Yes, right? So I'm saying like people who are remote, you know, they're used to being remote. I would expect them to be able to work well together. So we'll call it group remote. Yeah. And let's see, group remote, we'll do, we said Sarah, John, one. Technically, yeah, Karina as well. And Joseph. All right.
Yeah, we're missing Leo.
Leo.
Uh,
Who's Leo?
the younger.
Oh yeah, Leo. Let's put Leo with Luigi, Yen. Let's go. Cool. Is that everyone? Do we have Nick on a team? Yes. Okay. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. That sounds about right.
You would also take Winnie in our group?
You all get Winnie. You get a Winnie. You get a Winnie. You get a Winnie. It's all the same Winnie. You get a Francis. You get a Francis. You get a Francis. Ryan, did we? Yeah, you got a group. Anybody online?
Why is there a red line under my name and no one else's? Yeah.
What's an autograph?
Because we declared David up there. And
You see this?
okay.
Your computer will forever know.
It will forever know.
He's gonna go to his terminal and take it out now.
I wouldn't even know how, nor would I care to spend the time. Cool. If anybody is not in a group, Matt Whitcomb, you're a TA. Nima's in the other class. Ryan is you. I think that's everyone. If group remote is unable to contact another member of their team, and it turns out that only one of you happens to be here, we might put you into one of these other groups. Yeah, I feel like we haven't seen some of these people in a while. So, you know, y'all who I'm calling out, who might be remote, if you're actually here, say something on Slack and I'll feel bad. But if you don't, I'm gonna feel like I know what I'm talking about. Cool. That's that. Sweet. Do you want me to, let's rename these. Let's do like Well, hold on. We don't want to take that away. I'm sorry. I saw what I was doing. Charlie. Delta. Group Ein. Group. Cool. All right. So here's our groups. Charlie, you know what? We're gonna rename you Group Frozen. No, because like you gotta let it go, right? I work for Disney. You're like, cool. You know, I've actually never seen that movie. Yeah. Yes, me too. I also don't have children. If I had children, maybe I'd have seen it.
What movie is this? Frozen?
I've seen it plenty of times.
Fun fact, Frozen was like the biggest princess movie like ever. And in fact, it was so successful that now Disney's revenue has been dropping as Frozen fever is slowly tailing away. Like,
Wait, what?
what?
It's Frozen and Frozen.
So it's about that the parents ended up being alive and making child and being pregnant.
That's just
It's not about
conspiracy.
that. They should work on it because
Well, they've got Frozen 2 coming out at some point. But it's like, it's a big talk around Disney. Like, how do we get this revenue back? It's kind of funny. Make Star Wars better? Yeah. Well, hopefully Solo will be good. I think in like May or something. June. You'll start hearing more about it after Infinity War goes out, because you know they got to do their marketing campaigns, so they're not squashing their other big hits. They've really got a lot of big movies coming out this year. So. All right, feel free to stick around. I'll be here. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask. And I'll push up the project requirements to GitLab right now. What are we doing? Y'all on YouTube, have a nice night.